Hey guys, George at SoundTraxx here, and this week we have an exciting new install that we're going to do. We have this Kato Dash 944CW, and we're going to install the new 8-function Tsunami2 PNP decoder into this model. So let's get started. Okay, so now that we're going to start our installation on our Kato Dash 9. So the first thing we have to do is remove the coupler boxes. So in the essence of time, I've already done that. So there's a simple screw on the underside that holds the coupler box in place. So once you undo those screws, the coupler box slides out on each end of the pilot on either end. That frees the shell to simply remove. So now what we're going to do is we're going to grip the body and the frame, and we're going to slowly wiggle the body shell loose back and forth till we get the body shell starting to pull out. And there's two little tabs on one on each side here, locking the body shell in place. Now we're going to pull the walkway up, and we're going to slowly work the body shell off, taking care not to damage the shell. Now once we have the body shell removed, now we have our circuit board exposed right there on top. Now, the first thing we're going to do are the wires that are coming from the front trucks and the rear trucks match together under these clips here in the middle. We can simply take a pair of tweezers and remove these wires and pull them up out of place. Now, once we've done that, now we can take the two screws that hold the circuit board in place. We can simply unscrew the two screws. Now the circuit board is free, except for the two tabs of metal that are slid up through the holes, and these are your motor leads right here on the front. Now when we pull the circuit board up, we want to make sure to carefully pull those tabs out of place so we don't tug on them too hard. And then once we've got that out, now we're free. Now before we install our decoder, we're going to modify the frame in a few different places. Number one is we're going to mill this back weight down so we have room for our mini cube speakers to fit right here on the back platform with plenty of room. And we're going to install 4 of these speakers back here on this platform. Now the other modification we did was, in this case, we decided to extend the wires going to the trucks just a little bit longer so that way we can make sure we match up to the ends of the PNP decoder. Now, coming to the decoder installation, we are going to install our 8-function PNP board. And this is a brand new decoder that you can get at SoundTraxx.com or your local retailer. And there's 8 lighting functions on this decoder. And this will mount right here using the existing screw holes that we've got on top of our motor. So these are the 2 modifications we've made. Let's go install the decoder. Okay, now to do the installation, we're going to remove these screws that we placed as a placeholder to make sure we didn't lose them while we made our modifications. Now, one other modification I forgot to mention was we did solder wires orange and gray to the motor positive and motor negative leads of this, and we got rid of these straps that Kato uses on their motors. So before we place this circuit board, we want to make sure that the wires are going to go onto the side of the decoder that has the M+ and the M- terminals. So we're going to go ahead and pull these wires over this way. We're going to line up the decoder to match these holes, and then we're going to replace the screws into the holes, and we're going to start to thread them, the first one. Then we're going to grab our second screw. We're going to line it up, and again, you want to make sure that you have these plastic insulating washers underneath the screw head to make sure it's not touching any components on the circuit board that could cause issues later on. We're going to start that, and now we're in place. Go ahead and tighten that down to just snug, but we don't want to be too tight. So we're just trying to hold the decoder in place, just like that. Now with the decoder in place, now we can make our connections to the wires. So we're going to grab our set of wire tools, our set of wire strippers. We're going to cut the wires short. Now we're going to strip the insulation off of the end of the wire. This is where a pair of tweezers is going to be a very handy tool to have in your repertoire, because you can hold on to things you can't hold on to with your big fat fingers. Now we're going to go ahead and tin the ends of these wires, and then we're going to solder them to the M plus and M minus terminals. So now to tin the ends of the wire, we're going to take our flux, put a little dab on the wire end. We're going to do one on both. Now we're going to take our soldering iron, we're going to get a little bit of solder on the end of the wire, or end of the soldering iron, and we're going to tin the ends. And we're going to hold the wire with our tweezers, because again, it's a lot easier to hold onto the wire with that than potentially burning your fingers while you're trying to hold the wire. So there we go. Now that we've tinned the ends of the wire, now we're going to put them through the respective terminals. So in this case, the orange wire is going to go up through the M plus terminal, and the gray wire is going to go through the M minus. And there we go. Now we're going to apply a little bit of flux again to our joint. And grab our soldering iron, a little bit of solder, and we're going to simply solder that in place just like that. And we're going to do the M plus terminal next. And now the soldering is the M plus and M minus terminal is in place. Now the next step is we're going to do the track leads. Now when you're wiring this, you want to make sure the left rail and the right rail are separated respectively, and you're going to attach the left rail onto these terminals and the right rail onto these terminals. So we're going to go ahead and do that using this same soldering technique, and we'll be back in a second. Now I've attached our track leads to our track leads in the front and track leads in the rear. Now one thing I want to point out is I did slide a piece of heat shrink tubing over the rear truck leads before I soldered them on, because we're going to mount our speakers here, and then as a way to hold the wire in place, we're going to glue the heat shrink tubing to the frame right here next to them to hold the wire in place to make sure that it doesn't jet out and interfere with the replacement of the shell. So we're going to do that after we install our speakers, which we're going to start right now. So we have 4 speakers here. We're going to wire them up in a series parallel. And what that means is we're going to take 2 speakers, wire them up in series. We're going to take 2 other speakers and wire them up in series. And then we're going to parallel the pairs so that way we can use 4 speakers in this installation, but still only have an 8 ohm load on our decoder. Now remember, higher than 8 ohms is fine as long as you have good quality speakers. Below 4 ohms is where you start taxing the amplifier, and you really don't want to do that because you can cause damage to the amplifier. So what I've got is I've got some strands of our purple wire that you can purchase through our accessories section of the website or through your favorite retailer. We're going to go ahead and wire these up. So now you can see we've taken 2 speakers and wired them in series. We've taken the other 2 speakers and we wired them in series. So on the mount here, I've taken some double stick foam tape and secured it. We're going to peel off the backing. Now we're going to place our speakers. So we're going to take the first pair and we're going to set them very carefully because we want to make sure we're as close to that flywheel as we can, but not close enough to interfere. And we're going to mount our second speaker right up next to it, right up against it. Right up against it. We're going to take the wire and we're going to pull it aside. Now the next 2 speakers, there's not quite enough room to put the 2 speakers side by side. So we're going to take the second speaker in this case and we're going to mount it on top of the gear tower. Now there's plenty of room to do that in this particular model, but one thing you do want to make sure is that there's plenty of wire here so that when we're wiring this up, that we don't cause any strain on the trucks. So we're going to go ahead and mount our third speaker. And then we're going to mount the last speaker right here on top of the gear tower. Now as you can see, that last speaker will move, but it doesn't interfere with anything inside. We're going to take our wires, the left one from both sets of pairs and the right one from both sets of pairs, and we're going to wire those to the S plus and the S minus terminals on our decoder. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. what we're going to do is we're going to route them down under the decoder and along the edge, and we're going to come up from the bottom. And again, what we're doing is we're minimizing the amount of wires on top of the decoder so that when we add in all of our extra lighting functions, we'll have plenty of space to work on, and we won't be interfering with any wires we've already put in the model. Okay, so now that we've taken our wires from the speaker and we've wired it to the S plus and S minus terminal, we've taken these wires and carefully routed them under the decoder and come up through the terminals. Now, one thing it's very important to note is to make sure you're grabbing the same pole on your speakers. Now, speaker polarity is not quite as important, but you want to make sure you hook your positive side to the positive side of your second pair, or the two speakers will now be working against each other and not give you that good quality sound that you're expecting. So take care when you're doing that. Make sure you're consistent. Now, we've got track wires, we've got motor leads, we've got speakers. Let's go test it out and make sure it works before we start adding lights. Okay, now we're here in the test track. Let's go ahead and power it up. And as you can see, we have power. So let's go ahead and move it in the forward direction. We're going right. We're going to go reverse. Looks like we're all good to go. So now we're going to go ahead and install the lights into this model, and we're going to show you what we're doing. So let's get started. All right, that was a lot of wires. But now that we're finished up with the installation, now all that's left to do, we've tested everything. All we got to do now is put the body shell on. Now, when you're putting your shell back on in place, you want to make sure all of your wires are tucked up and away and out of the mechanism, because that's the whole point of using the shrink tubing to help hold the wires up out of place. Now, for a more detailed view on how to use the shrink tubing up inside your shell for routing wires, be sure to check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel for that video coming up soon. Now, once the body shell's in place, now we just have to test it, put it on the track, make sure everything still works. So now we have our DCC system powered up. I'm going to go ahead and grab the power to the rails. We're going to go ahead and fire it up. Well, we got power. We have horn. Let's check our lights. So first, we're going to turn on our headlight, and we can see that our headlight works. Next up is our ditch lights. We have both ditch lights, and on the Santa Fe model, they didn't alternate and flash, so I've got them wired to the same function output. Next up is our number boards, and yes, I do know I need to put lettering on the number board still, but time will solve all ills. Next up is the truck lights. And then last up is the step and walkway lights. And all of those lights now work. Now let's test the backup light. And the backup light works. So we've got a good running locomotive right here. So now all that's left to do is weather it up, detail it, finish the detailing, and get it into service. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you. Hopefully this was helpful for you. And if you do have any further questions that you need help with your installation or anything with SoundTraxx decoders, feel free to give us a call or email us, and we'll be happy to help anytime.